If there's one thing I've learned, it's that getting outside is always worth it, no matter the weather. Welcome to Humans Outside, where we're building a life around spending time in nature while learning from fascinating outdoor-minded guests. I'm Amy Bouchatz, a journalist originally from the beach in California, now working to love nature from my home in Alaska. Since September 2017, I've spent at least 20 consecutive minutes outside every single day, no matter what. Ready to hear from experts and outdoor lovers who make heading into nature just a part of who they are while we work to do the same? Let's go! Sometimes it can be hard to see how much something is holding us back in life until we start to get rid of it. That something can be literal belongings, harmful relationships, harmful habits, or just what we sometimes call stinking thinking. Thought patterns that keep us from taking the steps or doing the things that can give us the lives we're looking for. Today's guest, Cait Flanders, has some experience in offloading things that hold her back. In her best-selling educational memoir, Year of Less, Cait documents how getting rid of literal things and instituting a shopping ban helped her build a life she wanted. And in her most recent book, Opting Out, a podcast of the same title, by the way, she talks about letting go of habits or culture-assigned must-dos that helped her even further. For as much as I enjoyed reading Year of Less, I've enjoyed Opting Out even more because she ties the journey of opting out to preparing for and going on hikes. And you know how I like that. Today, Cait is going to talk to us about what it takes to opt out and what the heck it really has to do with heading outside. Cait, welcome to Humans Outside.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my goodness. I'm like major fangirling talking to you because I so enjoyed your books and I've enjoyed your podcast. And we were talking a little bit before we started recording about, just how you do it and how you record them outside, which is so cool to me. I especially enjoy hearing the water in the background. Makes me feel like I'm at a beach. It's great.
Yeah. So. Yeah. The podcast is like, it's such like a simple project in so many ways, but it has been one of the things I've enjoyed most the past few years.
Yeah. Sounds on theme.
That's awesome.
I think that we're people who our projects sort of take over our lives, right? And so then everything just sort of marches right along on theme.
Yeah. No, you're right. I'm not a fan of kind of other things taking over life. So that's cool.
All right. So we start all of our episodes imagining ourselves talking to our guests in their favorite outdoor space. Like we're hanging out, having a conversation somewhere you like to be outside. So describe for us where we're hanging out with you today.
I would say, well, first of all, I love the question. I actually just used that or like a similar kind of prompt in something I recorded with a friend. So that's just really fun. I would say, so I live in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, or that's where I am right now. And there are technically two mountains here. I mean, I really only think one of them is a mountain. The other one is like a hill that would take you sort of 10 minutes to get up, but they call it a mountain for some reason.
I like to call those a nubbin.
Yeah. So I would say that we're close to the top of the actual mountain, the one actual mountain. And yeah, there's like a few spots around it where you can kind of like tuck away from the trails and sit like under a tree or by a tree. And you can either look like in the direction of town and like see the city, or you could be on the other side facing the ocean. And I would say we would be facing the Pacific Ocean today.
Yeah. Awesome. Love the setting and I love the ocean. So this is perfect space to have a chat. So tell us, how did you become a person who likes to go outside and sit and have talks facing the ocean?
Man, I'm like, it's fairly new for me, or I would say something that didn't really become part of my life until about 10 or so years ago, maybe a little, like 10 or 12. But I would say I started spending a lot more time outside when I stopped drinking,
Mm.
which was like, gosh, almost 9 years ago now. And so, yeah, like, but as you know, as a kid, I didn't really spend time outdoors. I was someone who I would say just like I was like what I now know is like I had a lot of perfectionist tendencies, and so I wouldn't try things that were going to be hard out of fear that I wouldn't sort of do it well, which is so fascinating because of course now we can look at like I don't really know what it even means to be good at the outdoors, but
Yeah.
yeah, when I was a kid, you know, like if people had sort of said, "Do you want to go for a hike or do you want to even yeah, just go down to the beach?" I just wasn't really interested. I would often say no, or I would say yes to like the few places I knew. But yeah, I didn't spend a lot of time outside as a kid, and yeah, and then I don't know. I think things shifted a lot for me when I stopped drinking. Partially, it's like my social life changed. You know, the people I hung out with changed. The things that we did changed.
Hmm.
But I also just I think I think what was happening is that I needed and then was enjoying the feeling of getting into my body,
Hmm.
which I think is something I had avoided up until that point. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we'll talk more about that here coming up because we're going to
yeah.
touch on opting out of that kind of stuff. uh, the part of British Columbia you call home, and I referenced this earlier, is incredible and
Mm.
long and bushy. It's like a lot of. I drove through there, and I got to tell you, like, you get out of beautiful British Columbia, and now you're in like wet British Columbia.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think most of BC is probably wet, other than part of the interior, which is literally a desert.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, yep, yep.
Yeah. Okay. So before we talk about heading outside and how that meshes with opting out, like I want to give people a big picture overview of your story and assuming they haven't read Year of Less like I
Yeah.
have, or opting out. So walk us through just that, longer view story, if you don't mind, how you got to getting rid of so much of your belongings, doing a shopping ban, opting out, all that jazz.
Yeah, gosh. I mean, the decluttering and the shopping ban happened at the same time. The idea for the shopping ban came first. Although, I mean, like, I technically started on the on the same day, but
Mm.
the idea for the shopping ban came first and really came from a place of, backtracking it even further. When I was in my late 20s, I was maxed out with close to $30,000 of debt, and I
Mm.
and I say maxed out just because like I that was like what the banks were willing to give me. You know, that was my credit card limits and
Right.
line of credit and all of that. And I got to a point where I literally had $100 left in total amongst those limits. So I essentially at that point, I laugh now because I'm like, it was kind of like I did a shopping ban, but I wasn't calling it that. um,
Mm.
I was just, being maxed out took me to this place of like being extremely motivated to pay it all off because being maxed out felt so horrible.
Mm.
Like I had so much shame about it. And yeah, and just like was also so scared of it. Like I was so scared that that was going to be it for me. Like I just would never be able to kind of have a good financial future. And so I was really aggressive and honestly like too aggressive in my approach. But I ended up paying all of that off in 2 years. And so getting back to sort of baseline of zero within 2 years.
Mm.
And then what happened is that I basically went back to spending all my money. So I wasn't going into debt, but before, where I was putting upwards sometimes of like 55% of my income towards my debt repayment every month,
Mm.
I just went to spending all of it. And I think like I really can only look at it in hindsight and make some assumptions, but I think it's because I was just so hard on myself that I wasn't actually learning anything about money in
Mm,
that process. Like I was just honestly kind of punishing myself. Like I felt all this shame, and I think I was just kind of punishing myself, paid it all off, and then I didn't really have any sort of like goals of what I wanted to do next, or didn't know what my values were, didn't know what I was, I don't know, like working towards. And
mm.
yeah, so I kind of went back to spend or just spending all my money, and I did that for a whole year. And I would just say that I used to blog about all this stuff very publicly. Like I used
Mm-hmm.
to share my
Mm-hmm.
budgets every single month on my blog.
For
And
accountability?
yeah, and just
Yeah.
it was something I had done while I was paying off my debt. And so it just like carried through. I don't know, I like it was interesting. At the time there were a ton of people doing that. Like there was personal finance blogging was like a thing. And there
Right.
were like a lot of people doing it. I think now there's like way more concerns of sort of like privacy
Yeah. The
and
world,
stuff
man.
like that. Yeah. But yeah, so I would for it's just to say every single month at the beginning I would share my budget or like my proposed budget for that month, and at the end I would share the actual numbers. And I just never saved, and I would come back at the end of every month and be like, well, here's all the excuses for like why I justified spending all my money. And I did that for a whole year, and then got to this place of just honestly being sick of my own BS. Like I was just like,
Mm.
this doesn't actually feel good. Like I can make excuses every month for probably the rest of my life for why I can't save money. But like I'm actually sick of hearing myself say that. Like I'm sick of hearing myself just talk about why I can't save, and I want to try something different. So then I came up with this idea of just like, what does it look like to not shop for a
Mm.
year? And I didn't identify as like a huge shopper, but just knew like, I do absolutely or did have like a lot of mindless spending habits,
Mm-hmm.
and was just like, what if it looked like, what would it look like if I, pulled all that out, and it was like I could only, buy groceries and whatever the essentials are, and replace things if I absolutely need to, but you know, not buy books, start using the library, et cetera, et cetera. Like, what does it look like? And also, what would happen with my budget? Like, I just didn't know. And so I ended up, just to fast forward it, it's like I ended up actually doing it for 2 years and saved a ton of money in the process. Not the 55% that I was putting towards debt, but I can't actually remember the numbers. I feel like I saved something like maybe 30% of my income, or like high 20s, like something like that. And
Yeah.
then I lived off of 51%, and I was yeah, the other was like I actually was spending it, but I was finally spending it on something I'd always wanted to do, which was travel.
Right. So with like
And
an intentionality,
yeah,
like
yeah,
it's like a thought, it's like it's thinking through how you want to spend your whatever it is, right? In this case, money. But
yep,
in your case of opting out, which I'm sure you're going to talk about here in a second, your time, your
yeah,
energy, who you
yeah,
are.
yeah. And like money ties into those things, because if you have certain goals or values or interests or hobbies, like money sometimes is needed for some of those
Right.
things,
Right.
right? And
Right.
so yeah, I would just say like in the past I was someone who it's like I didn't even know what my values were, or just they weren't they weren't like actual priorities. I wasn't making them priorities. Even that, like travel, it's like I always made excuses for why I couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't say excuses. It's like travel was something literally that growing up I was told was like not an appropriate way of life.
Mm.
Like just this very practical kind
Yeah.
of working mindset of like, well,
Mm-hmm.
no, like you have to work.
It's like
And
excuses for why you shouldn't instead of
yeah,
couldn't.
yeah. And so like all of that, like I just took all that in and was like,
Mm-hmm.
well, even though I
Mm-hmm.
want to travel, it's like not really an option. So, but
Right.
anyway, so like at the same time though that I did the shopping ban, I also just thought decluttering would be a great idea for some reason.
Right.
And that, I mean, the simplest story is like I moved, like before I began all of that experiment, I moved 5 times in a calendar year,
Mm.
which is horrible. and and that meant that 5 times in a row, I moved boxes just from like place to place to place to place
Yep.
and realized how much stuff I owned that I never even looked at, and that I was like, spending time and money moving around, but I never looked at any of this stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just, it started with like, well, I'll just go through all these boxes. Like I'll start there and like see what all
Right.
this stuff is. And then it just like continually carried through. And yeah, I'm like now I own maybe like 15% of what I used to own.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah.
Yeah. So, it's interesting because one of the things we've been talking a lot off and on in this particular season of Humans Outside is this idea of the stories we tell ourselves.
Mm,
Um, and that could be a story like, I'm not somebody who travels.
yep.
I'm not somebody who saves money. I'm not somebody who can go outside. I'm not somebody who hikes. Like all of these sort of, it's like negative self-talk, but it's more than that. It doesn't have to be negative self-talk. It's just self-talk, right?
Yep.
And it's just the narrative that you've built who you are around. And I think the decision point there is taking a beat and saying, is this true or is it not true?
Yeah, or even like, what are the stories I actually want to be saying? Not even like in
Yeah.
this present moment, but say like 6 months from now, a year from now, 5 years from now. Like, who do I actually want to be? And like, even if I maybe don't know how to do it, like, if those are the goals, like, yeah, how does life slowly shift and change to ultimately get there?
Hey humans, just a quick break to ask for a huge favor. If you're loving this episode, could you take a second to give us 5 stars or a great rating and review in whatever podcast platform you use? Those ratings help other humans find the podcast too and spread that Humans Outside love around the world. I can't thank you enough for listening and sharing your support through a rating and review. Now, back to the episode. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about opting out. What might make somebody focus on opting out or of opting out of a specific thing, right? So, because it doesn't have to be like this blanket, I'm not going to shop for a year, right? Or like,
Right.
I think you and I are people who are given to sweeping decisions. Like you're like throw it all out, right? And I'm like, we're not just going outside, as a personal habit. We're doing it every day for a certain amount of time, for X
Yeah.
period of time, right? Like it has to be couched as a challenge for me, or I'm like, not that into it. Okay. So, but some people are not that dramatic. All right.
Yeah.
So what makes somebody focus on opting out or opting out of a certain habit, or like, how do you get to that decision point?
Yeah. I mean, like, it probably first should just, talk about what opting out even means. Like, to me, I think,
Yeah.
like, I would say I would define opting out as honestly just like changing paths in some way. And so that can be quite simple, or bigger. Simple being like, I don't know, like, yeah, I don't know, maybe like making a decision like, I'm not gonna buy books even just like until I've finished all the ones I've read. There's like a little
Mm,
challenge, or like there's like little ones, or I don't know, something kind of small but still it can feel big when you're getting started, is maybe saying like, I'm no longer going to use like one of the social media platforms. Like maybe this one I don't want to keep using.
yeah.
And then like bigger ones for me have of course been like, I'm not going to drink anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to, yeah, I guess like take on some of the challenges like the shopping ban and stuff like that. But even ones like I've, quit, or my career has changed quite drastically, I guess, like from what I thought it would be when I was young. I was certainly
Mm-hmm.
sold the story that, I should just work for the government and get a pension and do that thing because that's what both of my parents did. And so I did work for the government for 5 years. And then so the first opt out was that I decided to leave the government and go work in like the private sector.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like a big thing, or like a big thing in our family. It was like,
Well, it's like saying, that there's something different out there, right?
yeah,
It sounds like the way you're saying it sounds like it's not that big to other people, but like conceptually that is big, right? Because
yeah,
it's bucking your own culture
yeah,
for something that is divergent, and that's a
yeah.
big deal.
Yeah, well, and because it does have less security, right? Like the reality is with government, of course, like there are circumstances where there are layoffs, but honestly, like I was working for the provincial government and it feels like one of those systems that like unless you did something really, really bad, like
Right.
once you're in, you're in. Like you can stay
Yeah.
until you want to go. So yeah, like there were some, bigger ones, and then stuff like, moving. I moved to different cities for work. That was kind of a big thing, and then ultimately, I guess like the bigger ones later were like quitting all jobs to be self-employed, and then giving up my home to travel full time. And
Hmm.
so like there's been just like a a lot of like mini opt-outs along the way, or like there's been a lot of steps to get to some of the bigger ones or where I'm at now. But I mean, I talked to a bunch of different people for the book, and I feel like there are a lot of different reasons or kind of things that people would notice in themselves that would help them get to the place to make the decision to make a change.
Hmm.
There was everything from like, you know, it could even like be you're just really excited about this idea, and like maybe there's fear, but once you get to the place maybe where the excitement weighs a little more than the fear, then you would make the choice. It could be actually that like it's the opposite, and like things are really bad because of the choice that you've made, or like you're really unhappy in your life right now in some way, and can see quite clearly what like one or two things would drastically or even just potentially drastically improve it. So just to say, like, it doesn't all have to be bad, which I think was a helpful thing for me
Hmm.
to learn in the process, and also to reflect on and be like, yeah, like, choices I've made, it's not all because there are negative things happening. Like sometimes it
Right.
is because like things can be pretty good, but you can still know that it's not exactly what you wanted. Like you're still finding that like you are living this way maybe for a reason that maybe it worked for a period of time, but it's actually not working for you anymore.
So one of the things you talk about in opting uh, out is having somebody who can point that out to you and then listening to
Mm,
them. And I think it's like this and learning to listen to yourself, right? So it's like this continuum. So I like to think like I go outside every day. I don't try to. I actually do it. See, there's a
yeah,
story I tell myself, right? Like I'm trying, but no, it's a habit. Okay.
yeah,
So I go outside every day. And doing that is a choice that takes saying, what else am I doing that is keeping me from heading out the door right now?
mm,
And they're not bad things usually, right? They're
yeah,
things like deciding that my house could really use to be vacuumed, um, or that I'm playing a game with my kids, or whatever, right? Or I'm relaxing on the couch. All of these things are good,
yep,
but they're things that are keeping me from making the decision to head outside in that moment. Um, they are habits that I have that keep me from doing the thing I want to do, which is going outside. And it's not to say there's not room for all of those things. It's just they all need their turn. They don't need to be precluding each other.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, yeah. And that's it's like having the mindfulness to see that is a learning process. And the people who come alongside us to point out maybe something that's keeping us from doing that thing we want to do are such a critical part of that.
Yeah, they can be. I mean, like, because there's two pieces of it is like sometimes people will tell you things and you can feel in your gut that that's not right, right? Like
Hmm.
sometimes people will share things like, "Oh, what if you did this? What if you did that?" And or yeah, like or I think, this one thing could be holding you back or something, and like sometimes you can feel in your gut like, that that didn't feel great, or like, that's feedback maybe I didn't ask for in this moment.
Right.
Um, but I do think there's a difference with like the people who are maybe sharing like advice based on what they would do,
Mm.
versus the people who do know you,
Mm-hmm.
right? I'm actually thinking more like the people who do know you. I think that there is a kind of an approach in the communication that's helpful of just like asking people if they want to hear that first. Like,
Right, right, right.
are
As
you are
opposed to
you
like random internet stranger who's like, or like guy you haven't talked to in a really long time who dives in
yeah.
like, I can't believe. In fact, I remember you talking about this in your book. Like people are like, I can't believe you're doing this, or and she's like, who asked you? You know?
Yeah, yeah. But what I think is important is like I'd say like when you finally make the decision, like there is a change you want to make, I think it's really important to find, even if it's just one person,
Mm,
who will like help you stay focused on that. Like they will help you stay on that track and do the thing that is feeling important to you, because I think it's really easy. Like even it's actually like the easiest thing in the world probably to find people who will enable you to stay on the other path, like the one you're currently on. Like
mm,
it's really easy to find someone if you're like, let's say, yeah, like you want to go outside every day and that's the goal. There's a lot of people probably you could text and just be like, oh, I don't feel like it, and they'd be like, oh yeah, just don't do it. Like just don't bother.
mm.
It's really easy to find those people. And so
Yeah,
actually it's really important to find like one person, just one who will always encourage you or like ask you questions to get you back into the frame of mind of like why this
yeah.
is important to you.
How do we find that person? I have one, and I'm trying to think of how I found her, and she just sort of happened upon me, or she found me. Not clear, but how do we find them?
Yeah, I mean it's hard. I will say I haven't really like said this publicly anywhere, but in the book I talk about like who that person has been for me for a long time, and what's hard is actually we no longer speak after like a very
Mm,
long-term friendship. Um that ended this year. And so like that's sort of,
I'm sorry.
thank you. Yeah, it's which also is like a whole topic that I think is interesting of just yeah, like losing friendships as an adult is actually quite hard.
Yeah,
Um,
it really
but
is. I think it's
yeah,
like harder than when you're a kid because I don't know, maybe it's when you're a kid, your parent sits there and it's like, it's okay. But
yeah,
as an adult, you're like, is it? So
yeah. Well, or even like, I don't want to say it's harder than a breakup, but like
I don't know. I think it might be.
kind of in some ways, right? Like not in all the ways, but in
Yeah.
some ways. Um, but what I can say is I don't think it's that you just sort of magically find this like special unicorn friend who does this for you. I
Mm,
do think it is a relationship that you both create together. And so like
hmm
it takes work, because not um yeah, it's like not just that you find like a special person, it's that you put in the work into the friendship to consistently say to them like, here's what I need. Like, I
hmm
need you to help me stay on track. So when I do call you or text you and say that I want out of this, I need you to come back at me and tell me no. Like,
Right.
I need you to help me stay on this. And so it takes yeah, effort on both people's side, I would say, and which also requires, just like vulnerability and humility and
Yeah.
and all of it. But it takes two people.
Yeah. And having like a touchstone with somebody who has the same priorities you do. Like the other thing
Mm,
is relationships grow. Hopefully, you don't lose a friend, but they change.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
somebody else can shift into the role where your priorities and their priorities align. The person who is that person for me, her name's Holly, and she's actually
Mm.
she interviewed. She's a journalist like I am, and she interviewed me for my own podcast as the first episode of this season of Humans Outside because I wanted to talk about my experience of going outside every day for 4 years. And I needed somebody who was on the same page as I am. So we talk about that in the episode so people can hear that. But she's also the person who She sent me a text message yesterday saying that she was nervous about, she was going to go for a hike alone today for her birthday. Her husband was taking care of the kid, sending her on a hike by herself. And she doesn't hike alone. She hikes with other people, and she's not so into getting eaten by a bear, right? Like who is? And they're in a part of the country right now with which she's not familiar, so on and so forth. And so I know her well enough that I could, well, she knows me well enough that she could tell me that fear. And I know her well enough that I could say, yo, you're strong, you're independent, you're capable. And when you get to the top of wherever you're going by yourself, that's going to be a whole new moment for you where you're like, oh, hey, I did not get eaten by a bear and I could do this. And that's such an important moment. Don't find a friend, go by yourself. Here's the safety precautions if you need them, but like do the thing.
Yeah.
And then I could tell her, here's a classically Amy thing I did today, which was I entered a pie in our local fair.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Because I noticed that few people have entered pie this year. And also I thought maybe I would win due to lack of participation, and I have no shame. Okay.
I love it.
So at the time of this recording, we don't know if I won because the judging was last night and I haven't gone to see if I have my nice blue ribbon now. But like all I had to say was I did this because I thought that no one else was doing it. And she totally understood, like, yes, that is you,
Yeah.
So we have both an outside empowerment relationship and this understanding of your personality. But that's like something you develop over time, right?
Yeah.
And by doing hard things together and all of those things. I think we've digressed a little bit here from our point, but I love this conversation.
Yeah. I think these are all good points. And I'll say it just like to sum it up is like, I genuinely, like, I guess people can opt out on their own, but I think that it's like a really special experience, or like it adds to the experience if you do have people with you along the way. So yeah.
Okay, so talk to us about how you weave hiking into opting out. Like how is it woven through this concept, because you pair the two in your book and in your work. So I want to, like, how did we get to the point where that made sense, and why does it make sense?
I mean, actually, this one's the simplest answer in a way, which, like, I normally give quite long-winded ones, but the simplest answer is that, like, I knew this was a concept I wanted to talk about, but I literally just was out for a hike one day and was paying attention to the inner monologue that happens for me. It's not so much anymore, but, still even 2-3 years ago, the number of times I would go hiking and constantly, like, the voice in my head would tell me that I could quit anytime. And just things like, no one would even know. Like, I'm out here alone. Like, who's going to know? Or like, it doesn't affect anyone. I can do whatever I want here. So like, I could quit. And then actually how much work it would then take me to go, like, you don't want to quit. This isn't that hard. You only have like another 20 minutes up and then you're done. Like you're done, like the hardest part.
Right.
But I, going back to the fact that I'm someone who was not very outdoorsy. It took like actually a really long time to get to a place where I could just go out and be like, yeah, I want to do this. And that I wouldn't think, every time I was like huffing and puffing or struggling in some way, like that I no longer had those thoughts of, oh, I could just quit. And so, but anyways, in saying that, like, I was out there finally kind of paying attention to how many times I was thinking, like, I just want to stop. And it just kind of clicked for me of like, I bet no one knows that this is what's happening in my head. Like, I bet you people would just look at pictures on Instagram and be like, Cait loves hiking. Like, she just like runs and skips up those mountains.
Yeah.
And I'm like, actually, half the time I really want to quit. Like,
right.
And so it really started with that. Like, it just, I think, brought, or like started to piece it together for me that opting out might look like something people do naturally, or like it doesn't require too much effort. Actually, there are a lot of ups and downs to it. And yeah, or just like it's not all easy. Like, and of course it's not. Like, first of all, you're trying to do something different than you've ever done before. Of course that's not easy. But for me too, like when I think of opting out, or the examples of things I've done for myself, the hardest parts of it have also been that I like usually the decision I'm making, I don't actually know anyone in my life who's made the same decision.
Right.
And so when you don't have anyone to sort of use as an example to point to and say like, oh, I know this is going to work, or I know it's going to be worth it,
Hmm.
that makes it even more challenging because it's kind of like the further along you go, you're really walking further and further away from like, what basically just like how you were told to live.
Right.
And so you're
Right.
walking away from the people who told you how to live.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
the culture thing we were talking about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
where it's a should have versus could have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just had fun piecing together of like, okay, well, if I'm literally talking about like these are the ups and downs of it, what are like the actual ups and downs of a hike? Like what are the
Mm-hmm.
kind of the spots on the map? Or if you pointed at a even just a picture, like a kid's drawing of a mountain, like what would the ups and downs be? And just started to have fun with that
Yeah.
analogy.
Yeah. Okay. So you do, you didn't grow up going outside a lot, you said, but you do, of course, go outside quite a
Mm.
lot now as we are sitting looking at the ocean talking. Um,
Yes.
okay. So I'm wondering if, people don't usually think about heading into nature as being something we do instead of other things, just in
Mm.
addition to them. Um, and I'm wondering if you approach nature specifically and opting out broadly as an either or thing, right? Like, is it can you
Mm.
pursue a life with a nature emphasis without opting out of the obligations or the things that are keeping you down, for lack of a better description?
Mm. Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, you absolutely can. I think so. Like,
Yeah.
um, I mean, my commitments at the moment are fewer than some people. Like, I don't have kids.
Hmm.
And so that's like kind of one thing that I don't have to think about right now. But, I also have a lot of friends and people in my life who do have kids, and they make going outside a huge priority for them.
Right.
Even I will say, like, I guess technically in the book, I talked about two people who I would consider sort of adventure partners, and one of them is still very much in my life. Her name's Pascal, and she is the mother. Like, she's my friend, but she's the mother of kids that I have always called my niece and nephew.
Mm.
And I'd say in the first few years of her kids' lives, she wasn't spending much time outside. It wasn't actually really an interest at that point.
Right.
But actually, for her, I would say, like, my reflection of all of the hikes we've been on is that she ultimately learned that it's the best thing for her mental health,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
prioritizes it not only very regularly, but even in bigger ways at times of just, her and her husband will sort of coordinate in ways of saying, I'm going to go away actually overnight and do something. Like, I'm going to do an overnight backpacking trip or just go camping for a night or something. And you're going to have to deal with that. And he's like, yeah,
Yeah.
no problem. And they constantly make that work. And because they do it back and forth, like she'll tell him like he loves mountain biking. And so she'll say like, go away, go mountain biking for a day or two. And yeah, so I absolutely think that it does not have to be either or. You can build it in. And then, I mean, like, as her kids have gotten older, also it's like I can see how that
Right.
has benefited them as
Yeah.
well, right? And also just like with kids in general, like ultimately the best thing we can model is like what it means to take care of ourselves
Right.
and to have our own like hobbies and interests. And yeah, because like don't you want your kids to do that,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, in
yes.
fact, we were camping with my son this past week, but with both my kids this past weekend, and my 9-year-old is really just a very active dude.
Mm.
He spends all of his times when we're outside, like wandering around the bushes, smacking things with a stick. Okay, like this is just very like, the
Yep.
bushes are rumbling, and you're like, is it a bear or is it Huck? No, it's definitely Huck. He's always having some sort of battle. Okay, but I looked at him and I saw in my mind's eye 1-year-old Huck who's just toddling around outside,
Mm.
falling into holes because he's tired, covered in dirt, or sitting
Mm.
even younger in a high chair, by a lake, crying because it's a bajillion degrees outside and he's hot. It's just like over it.
Oh,
Okay. And
yeah.
I'm looking at this kid thinking, like, this is how we've raised him. We've raised him to be in this bush hitting something with a stick. And I was just like, what would this look like? Like, what would our lives look like? What would his life look like if this was not what we did? If this was not who we were? How would he be a fundamentally different person if we if our family priorities were, movie nights, which, I mean, we do movie nights, but we don't do them instead of camping, right? Like,
right.
If we were more people who spent our time inside than outside, what would his life look like? What would he be like? What would his personality be like? And I'm so grateful for the person he is, but it's always interesting to think about the person you're not, even with your kid. And it's it was just such an interesting sort of like, just moment. I don't have an answer for that. Right. But it was like, okay, like this is, I meant to raise him to go outside, but I also never stopped to think about how ingrained it would be if we did it, right? That it would just be a part of who he is, instead of making it, like forcing it to be a part of who I am, which is what we've been at this whole time.
Right. Yeah. So, well, and it also is like, feels like that's such an interesting question of like, who would he have become? And it's like, it's not even that either is right or wrong. It's
right,
just
exactly.
Yeah. Like, how would he be different? Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So speaking of how you'd be different, do you find spending time in nature helps you understand what you want to opt out of, or gives you insight into who you are and what you want to be doing, or what you need to be doing? And if so, why?
Oh my gosh. That's a great question. And it's gonna like the first thing that came to mind is sort of like no and like no, I don't think that nature necessarily is what informs me to, or like what I want to opt out of per se, but I think what nature does, this is the and, is like it reminds me to be present, especially right now. Like we're in like the seasonal shift, right? So you can like literally see how the earth is changing around you.
Yep.
And so it just reminds you to be present. And I would say like I don't make all my decisions outside, but that reminder to be present, I think like presence and awareness is what helps me decide to opt out ultimately. So like, I think like nature has certainly helped me get more present and like notice things in a way that I didn't. But yeah,
I feel that way too. Like, again, like there's no right or wrong decision. No. There's what's right for me. There's what's right for you.
Yep.
And there's what I've noticed is effective. And that's what we're here talking about. So
yeah.
Okay. So let's say people are like, oh, opting out. That sounds like my jam. What can you share 3 or 4 tips maybe that people can take to like use to figure out what they should, if anything, what they should be opting out of?
Yeah, gosh. And this is where it's like that the answers to that would be so personal. Like I can't even imagine all the possibilities out there of things that people are currently doing and might want to try doing differently. Like it's kind of infinite in a way, right?
How do you see that though? How do you see what they might be?
Oh gosh. Yeah, it kind of goes back to a bit of what we were talking about before, like the things that maybe you're either experiencing in your body around say like the thing you're currently doing. That's one option. So that could be like, the thing you've been doing forever and ever all of a sudden like doesn't feel right anymore. It might feel might give you anxiety all of a sudden now. It might make you angry. It might make you feel claustrophobic in some way. Those are sort of like options of like negative feelings. The other could be that you're the thing you're thinking of changing to, or like shifting over to, might feel exciting, or like it could be helpful, and like maybe you're nervous still about even trying it, but yeah, it's like you can just imagine what the benefits would be and know that you want those in your life. Um, yeah, it's kind of a big question. I think like it's more maybe like tips for like once you actually make the decision, like when you actually decide, like, yes, I am going to do this thing. I am going to do this thing that is maybe not what I was, planning for my life, but
Mm-hmm.
I do want to try going down this new path and see what happens. Like one of them would be, yeah, having one person in your corner who is going to help you stay on this new path
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and not just to encourage, because there's going to be a lot of people that encourage you to go back. Like this is like, I think the biggest thing I've noticed is that you can hold all of the excitement and like good energy in like kind of the early couple stages of it.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as you waver, like if there's any sign of feeling hesitant or nervous or scared to keep going,
Right.
there are lots of people who will tell you, yeah, stop, come back and do things the way we were doing it before. I
Yeah.
think about this very specifically with things like when I quit drinking.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was just
Um,
thinking that. Yeah.
like there's absolutely people I could call who even now, 9 years later, would probably say like, yeah, come on over. Like, oh, I'm so happy you're gonna like have a drink again. There are, people who in moving away would much rather me come back and stay where I was before.
Yeah.
Quitting jobs, yeah, like if you show like, self-employment's actually not working out or something, a lot of people would love to just be like, well, just go get a job, everything will be
Yeah.
fine.
I think you just hit on something really important, which is like you would love to be where you were before. Um, it's not like to me, it's like just because something's hard doesn't mean it's not the right thing for you.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not like it can be the right thing and it can be easy sometimes and it can be enjoyable most of the time. That does not mean it won't be hard also.
Oh my gosh, I think all of my opt-outs have been hard. Like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't
So
think
you
any of them
you
have been
move,
easy.
like you traveled, you decided to give up your apartment. You do all of these things. You kind of opt out of this normal quote unquote
Yeah.
life, right? And traveling's hard and doing all those things are hard. And it doesn't mean you don't miss the thing you gave up. And
Yep.
that applies to drinking, that applies to everything. But at the same time, like the net gain, like if you're talking about finances, right? Like zoom out and you look at, okay, is this worth it in the big picture? The
Yep.
answer is for me, inevitably, yes. And guess what? If you zoom out and you say, is this worth it in the big picture? And you make your pros and cons list or whatever your process is, and you realize that no, it's not, you can always like go back.
Yeah, you can. I mean, like I'm a big believer now in knowing that yes, you can go back. You will go back different though. Like
Mm,
because the reality is like if you even attempt to try something different, you're going to learn something.
hmm
And you're
hmm
gonna you're gonna now have that experience with you. And so that doesn't mean that you can't go back. It means you're gonna go back with like, new
Yeah.
information about
Oh,
yourself, about the world, about people in your life, like whatever it is. You're going to go back
such a good
though with
point.
some kind of new information
Yeah.
that will continue to inform, yeah, just as you keep going. But yeah, I think like yeah, finding someone who will stay on the path with you. Um, I don't know. It's almost like being prepared that you're going to get some kind of negative feedback, or like you're going to get people who are trying to rein you back in. Like that just really means honestly that you kind of have to learn how to navigate those conversations in a way where you're like, not just like ending the relationships or like whatever, but like learning how to kind of speak up for yourself and say like, I'm so like, I appreciate what you're sharing with me. And like, what I really need is for you to help me keep going here. I'm kind of struggling, but I want to keep going. And like, those are vulnerable conversations.
Right.
I do think there's a level of knowing that when you're opting out, like your life is going to change.
Mm,
Maybe it's just, your social life changes a little, or, maybe it's not big things, but I think almost like you have to get to a place where you know that that's going to be true before you even begin, or else it'll be just a lot harder when it does start happening,
hmm
like harder to
hmm
grasp. But I also think like trying to treat them all kind of like an experiment, meaning like it doesn't have to be a pass or fail. Like it doesn't have to be this thing that, you know, if you don't do it forever or if you don't do it perfectly, then like somehow you've failed. I think like embracing it as a learning opportunity is huge. Because then kind of like no matter what happens, you are going to come out ahead in some way.
Right.
And so like that just feels, I think, really important. Also because I know if I make something like a pass or fail, then as soon as I kind of do it wrong, I'm like doing quotation marks like with my fingers.
Yeah.
Like as soon as you do it wrong, it's so easy to self-sabotage, to give up. And it's like, you don't want to do that. Like if it's really important to you, you don't want to do that. So instead, like any moment that's kind of hard, or maybe you have sort of quote unquote messed up in some way, just sitting with that and being like, okay, what happened here? What was the trigger? You know, like what made me do this thing, or what made me, yeah, kind of give up on this? And like, do I want to keep doing that? Or like, what can I learn from this? Like to keep going.
Right. Oh, such good advice. So good. Okay. We can talk about this for the rest of our lives. Pretty
Truly.
sure.
Truly.
Yeah. All right. Got to cut it off at the passer. Okay. So here's how we wrap up our episodes. I like to know what people use as outdoor gear, because like their favorite, most essential, because I have gotten so many great recommendations from this, from this section. Please see my, I'm like basically a puffy pants evangelist now because somebody recommended them here. And you know, like I'll go to an event. Like I was at this race last week and somebody, you know, was talking to me in the line for the bathroom and I was all, but have you seen my pants? You know, so because you need these. I'm so warm right now because we were talking about how we were all cold. And they're like, this puffy pants are amazing. Okay, so I got to know, like, what is your most essential and then also your favorite outdoor gear, which might be the same thing, but sometimes these are two different things. So tell us, Cait, tell us.
Yeah, it's funny because I was thinking about this. I'm like, I probably don't have the best answer in terms of like giving an actual product.
Yeah, I mean, conceptual is fine.
Yeah, I'm like, I mean, just one thing that I would say that was uh, good for me to try and then to learn was to not buy gear necessarily because I like the look of it first.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, it's been to try everything on and like see what actually fits me best and what feels best on me. And so like maybe that's not what I look at and I'm like, oh, but like this is the one everyone else has, or this is like the color I really like, or whatever. But actually trying things on. It started for me with like hiking shoes, like hiking boots.
Yeah.
That was the first for me where like if I had gone to the store and just picked what I liked the look of, I would have gone for something very different. And instead, because I tried on like 6 or 7 pairs, it was really easy to go, well, these ones feel like I'm on a freaking cloud. So I need, these aren't the ones I would have picked, but they feel incredible.
Yes. It's like, why aren't you cute? But no, you fit. You know, I think this is regional too, because the things you see your friends wearing in one part of the country,
not going to work.
Not going to work for you. So I've just come to terms with looking like a marshmallow all winter long and not at all cute. And that's fine because I am so warm and happy. But like my friends in Texas, they don't look like a marshmallow. They look like they live in Texas. You know, and that's okay for them. And it's, you know, marshmallowy for me and we're all good, you know? But that's how it goes. Also, I mean, and to your point, like fits you well, right? Because some brands, they just I have like this incredible like orangutan length arms, okay? And I think, oh, like this fits my friend and it looks really cute. Well, the sleeves will be so short on me that the thumb holes will be up my wrist, like well up my wrist. You're like, that's not where thumbs are on my body. But then a brand like I really like Mountain Hardwear, not because I think it's anything spectacular in terms of a brand, but because their sleeves are long enough. So, so it fits my body, you know? And so maybe the off brand fits your body, you know, like the store brand, awesome if that's true because band is that cheaper. Maybe, you know, some different brand fits your body. mountain hardware fits my body. That's what I buy for me. So if you two have orangutan arms, guys, just look into it. The struggle's real. The struggle.
Awesome.
I have like very small lady hands. Okay. Very, very tiny hands on the end of extremely long arms. I have no idea what's going on over here, but here we are. So,
I love it.
So you'll find me in extremely long armed coats and very tiny gloves. It's just who I am as a person. Anyway, okay. So we've been sitting here chatting and, imagining ourselves with you on top of your one actual mountain, looking at the ocean.
Yeah.
But walk us out with maybe imagining a favorite outdoor moment that you have. Like if you close your eyes and just think about somewhere that you really, like just some, like, I don't know, happy place, something you go back to, a moment in time. Where are you and what are you doing? Walk us out with that.
Yeah, I am on, like, if we're talking about that, honestly, one of the best moments I've ever had was, so I was living in Wales for kind of the latter half of 2019. And there was a day that I went out hiking on the Wales Coast path with my friend Rachel. And we came up, like we were coming up this hill and I was thinking like, what is ahead? I also I probably should have been wearing my glasses, but I wasn't. But I'm like, what is up ahead, up there? Like there's something up here. And I mean, there's not really a lot of trees in that part of the world. And so I'm like, what is this thing that's just in the middle of the path? And as we got closer, it was a wild horse.
Okay.
And as we got closer and closer, there was 5 or 6 of them. And they're so relaxed and just let you walk right up to them and pet them. And yeah, just these wild horses just out there. And we're on the coast path, hence the name, is next to the sea. And so all you see, I have all these pictures and videos of just horses as though they are looking out at the ocean view. And you're just this is wild. This is what kids' dreams are made of.
Yeah.
Just going out and there's just ponies that want you to pet them. What is that? It was so cool.
Oh, what a great moment. Cait, thank you so much for talking to us today on Humans Outside. I know I could talk to you all day. I don't know if people want to listen to us all day, so we'll spare them. But if they want to see more from you, how can they find you? Tell us, how can they find you on Instagram? And of course, they can buy your books anywhere books are sold.
Yeah. I mean, Instagram's the best. It's the only platform I use. So just at Cait Flanders there. And or I guess the podcast is a thing.
Right.
Opting out.
Absolutely. We'll link all of that stuff in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Amy. This was really fun.
Well, thanks for listening to this week's episode of Humans Outside. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not give us a little love and leave a rating and review to make it easier for other listeners to find the podcast too. It really does make a difference. Until next time, we'll see you out there.